Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, we are a couple of minutes late. We've had a last-minute hiccup with a microphone not being able to come off mute, and we've had to fail over to our backup presenter, but I know he's amazing. So, yeah, sorry for being a couple of minutes late. So welcome all to the Web Search Tips for Surveyors webinar. You got me, I'll kind of more be acting as a host. I'm Nick Stillwell, consulting surveyor, working on modernising Landonline, and we're meant to have Phil Smith. He may come later if he gets his technology issues sorted, but we're swapping over to Seb Foreman, who I hope I'm saying his last name right. I've never had to say it out loud before, as our presenter. So, yeah, I'm sure you'll be great, Seb. Let's go. So today's agenda, we'll have a bit of an intro, a little bit of housekeeping. I'll do just a few, I guess, reminders about changes that are coming up with Landonline. I don't want them to distract from the focus of the session, which is very much about web search for surveyors. We'll talk a little bit, very briefly, about what's coming next for search, I guess particularly of relevance to surveyors. And then finally, not finally, the bulk of the session will be spent on a demonstration. That's where Seb will be jumping in. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers. So that's your chance to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. In terms of the question and answer session, you should, in your Teams interface that you're, I guess, viewing my face and my screen through at the moment, you should have a button that looks a little bit like this one here. It can vary a little bit depending on how you're accessing it, but that's where we want you to raise questions. It just makes it a lot easier to manage them at our end and mark them off as done. Otherwise, we kind of lose track of them in a long thread. So do appreciate if you can use that. We will do our best to mop them up anyway. So feel free to ask questions during the presentations. We'll come back to them at the end. Don't expect them to be answered during the session. So a few reminders for everyone. 30th of September is the switch off date for Legacy Landonline. That's what that's when it's going to be happening. So a PlanGen specific message for you is where you started PlanGen and Legacy, and the survey will not be approved before the 30th of September 2025. We encourage you to transition to new plan generation now, and remember to allow time for LIN's processing. Is it a complex survey? Is it a simple survey? How long is that going to take? Factor that into your planning. Plans prepared in Legacy that are requisitioned after the 30th of September will need to be checked and completed in new plan generation. So you won't lose them as such. You'll just have to open them up in new plan generation, give them a good check over, make sure you're happy with them before you resubmit. And it's meant to be a reminder for the end, but I'll mention it now anyway. So we sent out a sample of surveyors will have received a questionnaire about new Landonline today. Please complete it if you can. It's super helpful for us to understand your experience of the system. What's coming next for search? So it'll be search focused from here on out. I promise I won't bore you with more PlanGen content. So there's, I guess, two major search features that we haven't yet done. So that is search for survey by surveyor or firm. So this is where you can type in the signing surveyor's name or their firm and see the list of plans. People tell us it's helpful for license renewals and all sorts of things. So that one is coming. It won't be there before Legacy is switched off. If you need it in the interim, you'll be able to call the customer hub on 0800 and ask for them to help you with that information. And another feature that is still coming and unlikely to be there, almost certainly won't be there before the switch off, will be filter vector. So those two are still on their way. Other than that, we believe that's everything we're planning in the search space focused at surveys. So yeah, there are about 50 or 60 survey users who haven't had access to Legacy Search from many months, if not a year now. So we're pretty confident we've got it covered off and flushed out any issues. Excellent. That's the my bit out of the way for the bulk of the session. So I'm going to be handing over to Seb now, who's going to be running through the demonstration. So Seb, feel free to take over my screen when you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Nick. Yeah, so as Nick said, ko Sebastian toko ingoa. My name's Sebastian Vorman. I am the user experience designer for the search application. So my work covers a number of different areas, but my work for the past 3 years has been on building and developing and designing this spatial system that we're going to be demoing for you guys today. So I've stepped in very last minute to cover Phil Smith, who unfortunately is having some technical issues. So please bear with me. I'm working off his script that he's diligently put together, and he's got some great examples that we're going to show you guys today. So just checking everyone can see the web search screen that I've just brought up. Looks good on my end. Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we've got here. So for those of you who've used web search for some time now, a lot of this is going to cover old ground, but I think there's also a lot of people here who might be seeing this for the first time. So what we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be breaking this down into 3 sections. We're going to be first focusing on the search modes and the summary view, which is this left-hand part of the screen. Then we're going to be taking a look at the map and some of the spatial interactions that you can see there. And then lastly, we'll be talking a little bit about the product list. But before that, let's take a quick look at the web search header up here. So right now you can see I'm signed in as a Toitu Te Whenua firm member, but if you were signed in and you had access to multiple firms, you would be able to switch your firms by clicking on this button up here. If we take a look at the product list button, just working our way across the right here, this button here will open and close your product list. Whatever you have currently saved there is going to appear. This top right here, we've got the opportunity to review things like your client reference, create a request, update your profile, look at fees reports. We can even get the opportunity to reset any of the notifications that we've got up to display to you. So if you haven't seen the latest splash screen and you want to see that again, this is a great way to refresh things for you and reset. This here takes you out to our LINS website, where we actually collect all of the latest information about what we've released, all of the great work that's been done by our teams. If you have any questions or you have any feedback for us, we want you to use the give feedback option. The get help section takes you through to our help documentation, where we've got an excellent team curating various pieces of information related to all of the features that you have here. So your first port of call should be the help documentation, because we've got some really robust documentation there that covers all of the features in web search. But if you still can't find what you're looking for, then we'd encourage you to reach out to our customer contact group. So that's the header covered off. The other piece that I'll draw your attention to is top left here. This is what we call the app switcher. So right now I'm in web search, but if we take a look here, I also have access to some of these other applications here. You won't necessarily see all of these, but you will see the apps that you have access to in this top left flow. So let's talk now about searching, because fundamentally web search is all about searching. So top of the search menu here, top of the summary page here is the search box. Now, this search box is visible whether or not you have the summary page open. It is a core pillar of the search experience. So when we take a look at the menu, this is where we're going to find all sorts of different methods for you to search various things. On the summary page itself, we give you some pretty clear instructions as to what types of things you can actually search for. And then within the search menu, there are all the different ways you might be able to search for those things. So starting up top here, we've got all of the title search functionality, then instruments, then we've got some special supporting document searches here. After that, we've got survey. As Nick mentioned, we do have the search by surveyor name functionality that is still in development at the moment, but that's going to be expanding this soon. We've got your parcel search methods, appellation, legal description, parcel ID, and then we've got mark searches here. There's also a couple of other special search types for things like vectors and boundary lines. So let's start with an address search, and I've got an example here queued up, which is going to be 112 Tuam Street, which is in Christchurch. Now, when we do a search here, there's a couple of things that will happen at once. First up, the summary page updates with information about this particular title here. At the same time, we locate the entity in spatial. Now, this is actually something that you can control via the map settings. I'll talk a little bit more about that later when we get into the map space. Now, on the summary page here, we can see a few things. First up, we've got all your order options up front. So this will be things like like the title with diagram. If you're looking at a survey, you would see different things, but we call these our orderable products. Below that, we can find information related to the summary of this particular title here. So that'll usually include some pretty high level information. It's really important to remember that this is not the actual title. This is akin to the structured text view that you have in Legacy. So this is what this functionality is replacing in Legacy. If we scroll down a little bit further, most of the summary pages will have very similar structures where you now start to see some of these accordions, we call them, with all of these additional relationships. And every different item in web search is ideally linked to as many different items as possible. We've really tried to enrich your experience of exploring here by linking across to as many different things as possible. So for example, under titles, you would find instruments. You would also find your historical instruments, reference surveys, and there would even be links to requests, although I think that's an internal only thing, so I won't actually show you that one. If we're looking at the instruments, for example, clicking on one of these links will update the summary page and take me through to that instrument. Now, in the case of an instrument, this doesn't actually have a locatable entity, so that the map doesn't update. But if I go back and I take a look at that survey, that will then locate the survey as well. So you can see here, as soon as I do that, we locate the survey plan reference. But we're just going to park that for now and come back to the title. So that's the summary view of a title, and that's how we might arrive at a title by one of those address searches. Now, if I wanted to search for a road instead of a specific address, I can also do that using the address search. So I'm going to search here for Muyasin Avenue. Again, also in Christchurch. Phil's a Christchurch native, so that's why we've got so many Christchurch-based examples. Now, this one here is going to actually point to a road centerline in Spatial. You can see we immediately turn on the road centerline layer, and we also enable the street addresses as well. So the idea behind this is to enable you to quickly locate yourself in Spatial, and potentially, if you don't know a specific address, you can still get to there quite quickly. Now let's move on to the next search method. Now we're going to take a quick look at legal description. Now we have a few different types of legal descriptions, as you guys will know. I'm going to start with a simple one, which is lot 2 DP 495453. Oops. And this here is going to immediately link me through to this. So this is what we call our type ahead search. It allows users to quickly find things because we're actually pre-searching as you type in content. So if in doubt, just start typing and see what we can return to you at this stage. Please let Seb know he's going through so quickly that we can't see where his pointer is in relation to where he is clicking. Okay, my apologies. I'm just going to quickly stop sharing and do a quick shuffle just to ensure that we get a little bit more visibility on that. Just bear with me for 2 seconds. I just want to make sure we get this right.
Hey Seb, we've just had one comment in the chat that just said if you could move your mouse a tiny bit slower because there's a lag in Teams and it's not always with your voice.
No worries at all. I'll run that a little slower. Sorry, team. Okay, I've just moved over to a slightly different monitor just to improve the visibility of the mouse cursor. Hopefully that helps out a little bit. So now that I'm looking at this search appellation function, this legal description, this allows you to search by legal description or appellation. If I start typing in here, I can find these results quite quickly. So as I was mentioning before, we have this functionality called type ahead, and the idea is that it searches as you type. So if you're in doubt, just start typing something as much as you know, and ideally we should be able to match it against something that's in our database. So if I click now on this item here, I'm just going to quickly bring my script over to my other screen. Apologies for that. So this was an opportunity here for me to just link together the legal description, and now I've got that up on my screen here. So if I wanted to do, actually search for just some of the parcels in this space, I can actually adjust this search and get a number of different results. So I'm going to ditch the lot 2 portion of this and just focus on the deposited plan 495453. So you can see that if I leave off that first bit, that actually allows me to see all of the different results that exist against that. So don't be afraid to sort of cut out certain parts of the legal description in order to get a better result from the system. But as you'll see as we go on, we've got a number of different ways for a user to search for these various systems, to search through these various databases, and this is just one of them. So for example, I want to pick a different one over here. So if I select lot 4, that's going to direct me to something else. Right, now let's look at a really complex one, and Phil's got this really great example here that I'm going to copy paste because it is quite long. But even in this case here, we can whack this in here, get the legal description, and that's going to be what we can return here. This is an example of a really big parcel. Okay, if we're searching for a Māori appellation, I'm actually going to redirect our attention now to a different method of searching for appellations. So we've looked at the actual legal description here, but now I want to focus on the parcels, not the titles. So let's take a little look at the parcel search. So the parcel search is a little bit more complex. We've got this more comprehensive input panel that might be a little bit familiar to what you've seen in Legacy. So in Legacy, you had the opportunity to search by general, Māori, and other, and this is going to return me parcels, not titles. So in this case here, I'm actually going to do a Māori appellation search. In general, what we recommend here is less is more. So the less information you put in is going to actually allow us to drill down quite a lot more specifically. So we only have one required search field. So I'm going to search here on Aorowhenua. And if I conduct this search here, this is going to return all of the parcels related to that specific Māori block. So from here, because I've got a whole big list of parcels, we don't update the map right away because this would show you most likely parcels scattered over a very large area, and in some cases there can be tens of thousands of parcels. So that would cause issues for our search system. So this is where I want to direct your attention to a secondary system. When we're looking at these results tables of parcels, we can review the various pieces of information related to them. And over on the right here, we've got this function locate and add to product list. If I want to see where this parcel is, I can use the locate function. And I can actually click through these one by one to review these spatially to decide, are these actually what I'm really interested in looking at? So if I click this first one actually doesn't have any spatial data to display. As you can see here, we've actually got these little checkboxes here that can inform me a little bit more about where these parcels are and what information is on them. This one, for example, shows me that this parcel has a legal description, but it actually doesn't have a survey appellation. So in many cases that can often correspond to there not being any spatial data, but not always. I'm just going to quickly click on the ones that do have a survey appellation, and if I click on these various ones here, I can very quickly zoom around the map and get a sense of which parcels are where. So I'd encourage you, if you see this locate function on something, have a click around and see if that's going to help you find that item in spatial. Okay. Let's take a look at a different parcel search method. And again, please bear with me. I am working through a script that isn't mine. So I know Phil had big plans for some of these spaces here, and he probably had other things he wanted to add in. I'm going to do my best to fill those out. Okay, let's take a look at a parcel ID. So in many cases, when you guys are doing your work, the parcel ID is the definitive association for a single parcel. So what that means is when I search a specific parcel ID, I'm always going to be taken to a singular parcel. So I've got this example here. When I go to this one here, that's going to take us to this specific parcel here. So really have a poke around the different search methods and find the one that is going to match your workflow for the piece of work that you have in mind. There are a number of situations where you might want to also look for a parcel that doesn't exist spatially, possibly because it's historic. So I'm going to look for a historic parcel now and show you what that actually looks like in spatial. So let's quickly grab that here. And I'm going to chuck that in here. So this is actually under lot. We're going to do a very complex search just to show you how we can use this for 01. And then we're going to go deposited plan. And then from here, we'll go 579261. 579261. And if I search for this one here, it's going to take me to a single parcel, and it's going to show me this historic parcel. So when you search for a historic parcel, you actually can't turn on a layer that contains this historic parcel data, but you can still find it spatially by searching for it. So when you find a historic parcel and you want to see it, the locate function is your friend. So let's say, for example, if I move away from this and I need to be able to see this parcel, the locate function is going to bring me back to that space here. So in this example here, I actually can't turn on any layer that shows this, but this allows me to kind of see this parcel and get a sense of maybe what the extent of that parcel was, and that might inform the information that I'm looking for on the current parcels, just to get a sense of, hey, how was this actually subdivided? How did this all kind of come about? All right. We're going through a lot of different search methods, and appreciate that my speed and cadence speeds up a little bit when I'm nervous, so again, please bear with me. Let's talk a little bit now about some of the other search methods. So we've talked a lot about parcels and titles. Now let's talk a little bit about surveys. So if I search for a survey, in general, the best way to search for a survey is to include the prefix. You can search without it. So in this example here, I'm going to type 23232. As you can see, we've got heaps of different ones with specific prefixes and across lots of different land districts. So if you want to make your search more precise, we recommend including the prefix if you know it. Let's take a look at one of these surveys. Now, a survey actually points to the survey plan references that we can see in spatial. And as soon as I search for that and it locates it, it's going to turn on the associated layer, which in this case is the registered survey plan references layer. So I can see here this particular survey plan reference, and I can also see all the other survey plan references in the area that share the same status. So from here, I could take various actions. I'm not going to get into the map just yet. We're going to come to that in the next section, but I just wanted to illustrate to you how the different search methods would work. So please explore these, try and find the things that you're looking for, and then from there you'll be able to take various actions against the relationships. So in this example here, I can actually take a look at those parcels. Remember, I talked about the locate functionality. So in this case here, we're seeing that locate functionality again displayed, and this allows me to very quickly see the associated parcels for this particular survey plan. So I can see the historic parcel that's over there, and you can see it has this kind of dashed border that indicates it's historic, versus the current parcel, which you can see here has a solid border. So that's a good way of indicating, of getting a sense of what this information is. Right. Let's talk about marks. Now, mark searching is something that's relatively new to our system, and we have 3 different ways that a user can search for them. Node ID and mark ID, again, use those specific entity IDs. So the mark ID is the one you'll be quite familiar with. The node ID corresponds to the spatial coat hanger for those marks, which might be a little bit less familiar for you, but certainly the mark ID is one that might be useful. However, the most useful one for you guys is probably going to be the mark name search. So let's just reset web search and let's take a look at mark name searches. Now, as you can see with mark names, we've got quite a lot of stuff you can do. Before you even search your mark name, you can make some decisions around potentially some filters you might want to apply to the mark name search. So below here, we've got a number of filters like coordinate system. You can filter on a specific coordinate system, the order of the mark type, the land district it's in, and the mark status. Actually, that's an internal thing. Again, sorry, picking up from Phil here, that one you won't see. As you can see, we've got some internal, external discrepancies that give internal users a bit more functionality. Okay, let's try a mark search here. I'm going to run a wildcard search, which is something we support in specific searches, and mark name searching is one of them. So I'm going to search here for MA star DP 606215. And when I run the search here, this is going to search for all of the marks that match that. Now, as you might be familiar in Legacy, when we do wildcard searching, we can do a few different things. We can use an asterisk in the place of any number of characters, or we can use a question mark in replacement for a single character. So that's something you'll see referenced in the tooltips and the help content as well. So in this example here, I've said, hey, I want anything that matches this particular string. So from here, again, we've got the ability to locate, and this is going to allow me to quickly tab between these different marks and see where they are in spatial. It's very, very fast. We've built the system to be really, really quick with this. And from here, I can actually go and investigate these individual marks. So this one here, let's take a look at this first one. Clicking on the link will take me through to the summary page for this specific mark. And here I can see all sorts of information related to it, as well as its reference surveys, any physical state information, and otherwise. So the mark search is really, really powerful here because it gives us those relationships to those other pieces. All of that stuff is linked again, so we're trying to make it really easy for a user to explore very broadly from any single entry point. Legacy relied on you having to drill down with single searches every single time, but here we've tried to provide as many cross links as possible to allow you to quickly pivot around in your workflows. Okay, lastly, let's talk about a vector search. So vector searches right now are done by vector ID. So I've got an ID here that I'm going to insert, and when I search on that, we're going to locate that item in spatial. So here we go, the map immediately updates and it shows me where that vector is. In this case here, it didn't turn on the associated layer. That might be a bug. I'll look into that later, but this is an example here of all of those other vectors that are in the same area, and we can see where that one is in relation to them. Okay, now we're getting into my favorite part of this. We've talked a lot about searching. As I mentioned, searching is a big beast. There's many different pathways you can take. There's many different ways that you can find many different things. As you can see here on the vector page, I can even go and see those specific marks that it's linked to, which is really, really helpful. But now let's talk a little bit about spatial. So spatial is kind of my baby here. I've spent the past 2 years building up the functionality in this space, and I want to talk you through all of the different pieces that we've got here. So let's simplify what we've got. We're just going to take a look here at spatial. So first things first, how do you interact with spatial? So the most important thing to remember with spatial, and this is a big change from a very early version of web search that we released about a year and a half ago, has been since updated to what we call spatial 2.0. So spatial 2.0, the most important thing to remember is that you have to have layers on if you want to interact with spatial. You cannot just have a blank canvas. You can't just click on the base map and get data. You have to enable data. So where do you do that? What you need to do first is you need to go to the layer control panel here in the map control rail on the right. And if we turn on the layer control panel, we can see in here a menu of all of the layers that a user can interact with. Now, think of this as the menu at a restaurant. You're finding the layers that you're interested in working with. And once you select a layer, let's say I want these survey plan references on, over in the current layers tab is where I can find the layers that I have enabled. So now I'm working with these layers. This is my workspace. This is my order space where I can order all of the things that I want to work with. So now I've got these different layers in spatial. Let's take a look at how we actually interact with these. So you'll be most familiar with the clicking on an individual entity. Now, one of the things that we've done recently as an improvement is we've actually decoupled the info panel from the map. So that means that now I can pan around the map and the info panel won't be blocking my path. However, some people actually really liked having that information as close to their click point as possible. So if you preferred the info panel the old way, you can still get that back. That's via this map settings function here. And if I toggle off this option here, which says show fixed info panel, that allows me to bring the info panel to be attached to the map. So if you like just clicking and immediately reading the data right there, this is going to be a system that works for you. I personally prefer having the info panel fixed and floating bottom left because that allows me to kind of keep focus on the spatial view but still have this information readily available. So this is my preference. Now, single selecting brings up this info panel. Now the info panel has a very short bit of information on it, a very short set of information, sorry, and this information usually covers all of the key attributes of that item. So in the case of a parcel, we've got all the standard stuff like a parcel ID, an appellation, we've got the area, we've got status, topology class, all that sort of stuff. Now every single item in spatial that is interactive will have an associated info panel. So if I click on the survey plan reference, for example, that's going to bring up the survey plan reference functionality. The other thing that the info panel does is the info panel gives you access to item-specific functions. Now, what item-specific functions are there? Well, it depends on the item. So in the case of a parcel, I can locate this parcel. Now, I already have it selected, so that might not be super useful. But if I was really zoomed in and I could only see part of this, maybe because I'm deep in a rural area and I'm looking at a really large parcel, locating that will zoom out to give me the picture of that item's full extent. So that could be a really useful function when I'm working on a rural property. Now, if I select this item here, there are a number of other options that I can see here for this parcel. First up, I can see these view full summary. Now, we've seen the full summaries. That's the side panel here. This is where I bring up the full information on this item as well as all of its rich relationships. Now, that functionality here for parcels is unique because parcels, we also bring up the title information too. So if I click on this info panel again, I can choose, do I want to see the parcels summary or do I want to see the summary for its related titles? So if I click on the related title, that's actually going to bring up the title that is related to that parcel. So as I mentioned, every info panel has its own set of custom function of specific functionality. So if I click on the survey plan reference, there's the opportunity here to view the full summary of that survey plan reference. So if I click over here, I can see the survey plan summary there. Cool. Now let's talk a little bit about something you guys will be really excited about, I believe, which is multi-selection. Now we have a few different methods for multi-selection, but one of the things that's really important to remember is it's a little bit different from legacy because web search lets you multi-select different types of items. So you're not limited to multi-selecting entities from just a single layer. I can actually multi-select parcels, survey plan references, marks and vectors all at the same time. So let's take a look at how we actually multi-select. The first multi-selection method is the simplest. I hold down the control key. If I select an item and then hold down the control key, I can now select multiple items. And if I do that, you can see all of these items get added in pink. And down here, bottom left, I can see that the info panel has now changed to what we call the multi-selection bucket. So the multi-selection bucket collects all of the things that you have currently got selected. Now, I mentioned that I can select multiple types of items. What happens to the bucket when I do that? So when I do that, if I multi-select the survey plan reference, the multi-selection bucket updates to categorize the different items that I have inside it. So I can see here I've got parcels and I've got survey plans. And the nice thing is we bring in those specific functions for those various items into the categories within the multi-selection bucket. So you can see here on the survey plans, I can add these to the product list, or I can do this other special action that I'll talk about in a bit, which is to add it to the survey data extraction panel. That is not a function that parcels have. So as a result, each category inherits the various functions that that specific type of item has. Now let's talk about some of the other ways that I could multi-select. Now in order to expand this a little bit, I'm just going to enable some mark layers and some vector layers just so we can see the multi-selection functionality in its full glory. So let's zoom into this area here where we've got a bit of everything. Okay, how do I access other ways to multi-select? Now, let's direct our attention over here to the map control rail. If I work my way down here, I get to this one here that has this little arrow cursor. This allows you to choose a multi-selection mode. Right now, I'm in standard selection. So that means that if I click on something in spatial, it's going to bring up the info panel and it is going to just select that one item. If I hold down control, I can multi-select things. But I might want to select based on an area or based on a polygon because I'm doing specific work that relates to an area, in which case I want to choose one of these other methods, rectangle or polygon. Another thing that I think is really cool here is that we've actually made these work with hotkeys. So if I close this and press R, that swaps immediately to rectangular selection. If I press S, that swaps back to standard selection. But I can also do it by clicking inside this box. So let's do a rectangular multi-selection. If I click on this guy here, this changes my cursor. I can no longer click on a single item. Instead, now what I'm doing is I'm drawing a rectangle for the purposes of selection. So let's click in one corner here and drag the rectangle to cover this area here and click at the other end. Now, the way this works is everything that is wholly contained by this rectangle will appear in the multi-selection. Now, some of these parcels here were not wholly contained by that rectangle, so that's why they didn't get added into the multi-selection. If I choose to use a polygon approach, then the polygon approach lets me create some more intricate shapes, which might be really useful if I want to, say, catch all of these parcels over here that are just by this river. So I'm going to go all the way around here. Now, I can close this by clicking back at the beginning, or I can double click. now that I've done that selection, I've got a much more precise selection here that covers all of these items in there that I was interested in. Now we do unfortunately have a small bug that is affecting survey plans. We have got this on our radar to fix. You can see the survey plans didn't get selected. Like I said, bug, we're aware of it, we're fixing it. Now let's take a look at what's inside the multi-selection bucket. Inside here, I can see all of the items have now been categorized. I've got vectors, I've got parcels, and I actually didn't grab any marks. So let's make that rectangular selection again, and we'll just see what we end up with there, just so we get a bit of everything. Okay, now I've got marks. Damn it, sorry, I just misclicked there. Let's do that again and grab some more of those. Okay, I've got marks, I've got vectors, and I've got parcels. And again, I've got the opportunity here to refine what's in my multi-selection bucket as well. So if I decided, you know what, I just wanted to have the marks on just to see what was there, I didn't actually want to select them, no worries. You can just clear the entire selection. All of those marks have just been removed from the multi-selection bucket. So we keep the multi-selection bucket really easy. You know, it's really easy to dump things in and out of it. Now, obviously, it has limitations. You can select up to 1,000 spatial items. So don't go trying to select the entirety of Wellington. It won't work. You are limited because there's only so much information we can hold at once. Otherwise, the system starts to get really sluggish. So that's the limitation that you have to work with. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the functions here. I want to add these parcels to the product list because that's something that I want to keep around and I want to do some extra work to. So let's see how we do that. What I can do here is click on this category and say, hey, I want to add to the product list all of these parcels. And I've selected 2 of them, so I'm going to add both of these parcels to the product list. As soon as I do that, we populate the sidebar here, the product list, with that piece of information. So I've got 2 parcels in here now, and I can see all of those relationships. I'm going to do a bit more of a deep dive into the actual product list functionality a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you what that functionality actually does. Okay. Now let's talk about one of my favorite new functions that we've delivered, which is the ability to display a survey spatially. Now I am in an area that has got some new survey information. So you might be familiar with this functionality in Legacy called display survey work. We are mostly just interested in surveys here, so we call this displaying a survey in spatial. How do you do it? Now, you can do this a number of different ways. As I mentioned in web search, there are always many, many pathways to get you to the functions that you might be interested in. But let's just look at it spatially. I found this survey here. So DP458937, nice and new one. Now, I want to actually see the survey data superimposed on the map. So what I can do here is click on this new function here called Display Survey in Spatial. When I click this, this is going to check all of the display options that exist for this survey. So what we're actually doing here is we're going and checking the survey data for you to understand what information is actually available for this survey. So that way you can have confidence when you're looking at this survey will have all of these pieces of information. Now, if I had selected an older survey that maybe had been translated or gone through the data transfer process, I might not necessarily see all of these pieces. Let's take a look at what I can actually do here. In here, I can change the display color. So let's say I want to see this in purple. I can now see what those things will all look like. And I can also decide whether or not I want to turn on some labels. Now, the beauty of this is, unlike Legacy, you aren't locked into those choices now. You can change this at any time. You can revise these selections, and I'll show you how to do that. Let's actually display this survey and see what it looks like. I'm going to turn on the parcel fill just to make it easier to spot. So let's display the survey. Bang, just like that. So now I've got the survey information superimposed over the map, and I've turned on all of those labels for the vectors just so they're a little bit easier to spot. Now, how do I control some of these options? Because let's say that these labels are actually getting a little bit overwhelming and I want to see a little bit less data. Well, this entity, this displayed survey, actually exists in the layer control panel. So if we go to the layer control panel, we can see here I've now got displayed surveys 1 of 10. So you can display up to 10 surveys simultaneously on the spatial view. At that point, you'll need to start removing them in order to replace them with new ones. But let's expand this. In this, I can see all of those same options that I just saw before. So you're not locked into this purple color if you decide you don't like it after all. Let's change it back to red. And you can see immediately it updates in spatial. Now, if I decide I actually don't want to see those boundary vectors, I just care about the parcel boundary lines, Brilliant. I can just turn those off. I can also turn off the marks, and I can turn off the boundary vectors and just see the parcel data. So all of the survey display functionality is now locked inside this layer control function. So that is a big improvement from legacy, because legacy, you essentially had to research that survey, reapply it and redisplay it and reset all of those options. Now you're never locked in. You can always choose and control it just like any other layer in the system. So if I click on this, this is actually interactive data. This is not just for display purposes. I can actually see the information here. So if I click on this, this is going to allow me to see information on that parcel in the survey. If there are multiple surveys that are in the same place here, here I can resolve that selection by way of clicking on that sort of overlapping point. So anytime you've got multiple things that exist at the same location, when you click on that area in spatial, you'll get the opportunity to resolve that selection and choose the thing you're genuinely interested in. You might have also noticed that as I hover over those things, I can actually see the map tell me which one it is based on that little hover effect. So that gives me certainty that I'm actually clicking the thing I'm really interested in. So now let's move on from displayed surveys and talk about coordinate transformation. We know this is something that's really important to you survey users. So I want to do that in a bit of a combination of ways. I'm actually going to use some of the systems I've shown you now to do that. We're going to use the multi-selection functionality to select all 5 of these marks on the road here, and then from there we're going to run the coordinate transformation. So I'm going to grab all of these marks, and as we know, it's going to select everything that is here. So it's also going to grab some vectors, but I'm not bothered by that at all, because I can actually tell the system, hey, I'm only interested in doing something with these marks. So you can see here, I can add these marks to the coordinate transformation. Now, we've enabled the ability to add these things straight to the coordinate transformation just from your selection. But if you really want to, you can also bring up the coordinate transformation tool ahead of time and see what options are available to you. So over here on the right, this little button here is the survey data extraction functionality, and if I click on this, this gives me options for the various types of extractions that I can do. But I know I want to do a coordinate transformation, so I'm just going to add those marks directly to the coordinate transformation. Immediately it opens up this panel and it populates those 5 marks that I was interested in here. And I might know that I'm doing some work in this area. Where are we? I think we're in Christchurch somewhere, so I think I'm going to choose a Christchurch output coordinate system. Let's go down and find something there. I don't know my geography that well, even though I work in LINS, but I'm going to find, sure, we'll choose. I should have thought of this better. What's a reasonable coordinate system for this area? Apologies, this is the one part I did not prep ahead of time. I think we'll go Gawler. Go Gawler 2000. Brilliant. This may or may not work. Mount Pleasant also would work. Brilliant. Thank you to all the geography specialists out there who can help my ailing mind. Okay, so we're going to run this transformation here. This will hopefully work. And this has actually run the transformation for me, which is really great. It was a really quick one because there was only 5 marks in there. And that has exported it for me as a little CSV file that I can use to import into my survey software. So you can have up to 500 marks as part of your coordinate transformation. So if you knew you were doing a big area, you should be able to select a lot of those marks at once and export those. So that's the coordinate transformation tool. Now let's talk about some of the other functions in here, which are the survey data extraction. Now, inside here, I can see that there are a number of selection modes. This might determine the type of extraction that I can run. So I've run a coordinate transformation, which you can see here at the bottom is all about marks. I now want to do one that focuses on a polygon. So I actually want to extract a specific area. This is similar to the multi-selection functionality, but instead of it selecting entities, it's actually defining an area for extraction. So I'm going to do this area of interest polygon. Now, important to note that if you've got any stuff in here, changing this mode will clear your selection. So if you haven't run your extraction yet, make sure you do before you clear something. Okay, I'm going to say area of interest polygon. I know that I'm doing some work in this space, so I'm going to run a little extraction here. So I'm just going to draw this boundary up along the river, down along this property boundary, around the edge here and back, and then come all the way home. So I've now defined this area, and it tells me a little bit about the information. We've got a polygon, 6 corners, it's about 1.63 hectares, and I want to extract all of the marks, vectors, and parcels that are here. This allows me to choose a coordinate system. Perhaps if I knew that if I'd just done one in Gawler, I might want to do this one also in Gawler. So I'll just go type that in. Actually, let's make it easier for ourselves and grab that like so. So I'm now going to run an XML extraction. This will give me a land XML file that again I can bring into my third-party software. This one can take a little bit longer because there is often quite a large amount of data in these spaces. And it's not just a simple 5-mark transfer. You can see here my computer is throwing up a bit of a hissy fit, doesn't necessarily love XML files, but you can trust the ones that you get from our software. So there we go. I've got my XML file. I could then bring that into my software. Right, we've covered a lot of different things. Now I just want to talk you through the remaining pieces on the map control rail, because there's a few other functions here that I haven't talked about. First, let's talk about the base map control. Base map control is pretty straightforward. You have 3 choices. You can choose a topographic view, a satellite view, which you'll see brings in our Lens Base Maps satellite view. This combines aerial photography and satellite views. So some areas actually have very high resolution data, which we're very stoked with. Or if you just prefer to just see the data because it's a little bit overwhelming, you can actually just turn the base map off completely. So we give you a lot of flexibility in that space. The other thing that's really important is this one here. This is called the data display threshold. Now the data display threshold is the equivalent of the legacy functionality called view scale. Now view scale, as you know, if I zoom out here and I run over the 1 to 5,000 mark, all of those parcels are actually going to vanish. And that's because the data display threshold says you can only see parcels up to 1 to 5,000 when you've got it set to an urban area. Now I can change this. I can update this and say move it from small to medium or to large. Now we do recommend a bit of caution with this because you can end up trying to display a lot of data all at once, and that can sometimes slow the system down. So caution using this when you're in an urban environment because there's just so much data there. But again, we trust you to make smart decisions around this. So because I know I'm looking at this really big section of land that's kind of half in the middle here, I am going to bump this up to medium, and that is going to enable the display of these. Now every single layer has specific values that it will stop being displayed at. So that's that data display threshold working there. So this will allow me to see this data out to a heck of a lot further, but yeah, explore at your leisure. Okay, the last section I want to talk about, we're getting a lot of data coming in here, so let's just simplify things a little bit. I'm going to get rid of those marks because that's getting a little overwhelming. If you ever run into the situation where we're loading in a lot of data, you can actually just hit the escape key. That's going to stop the loading of the map. So in Legacy, this functionality was also there. And if your system's getting overloaded fast and you can see it's still loading in information, just hit the escape key and it'll give you a moment to think and reevaluate, have I got too much data that I'm displaying simultaneously? In this case, I'm bringing in all those cadastral vectors and all those marks. Could get overwhelming in this urban environment when I'm trying to see all of this data. So hitting the escape key allows me to quickly revise this and I can make sure that I don't display too much. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about this other function down here, which is the map settings. Now, this allows you to customize your experience with web search, your experience in spatial. And I won't go through each of these. I would encourage you to explore these and decide which ones you like best. They're all pretty self-explanatory, but these are saved against your account. So when you log out and come back in, these settings are going to be just the way you like them. So I'd encourage you to spend 5-10 minutes just exploring the map, testing out these different options, seeing which one of them you like best. But important to remember they are saved, so you will only have to set them once and then you can forget about them. Okay. Last one we're going to talk about, because I am conscious of time, is the product list. Now, the product list is very similar to the summary view in that it allows you to interrogate relationships and see a little bit of information about those things. Now, remember those parcels I located earlier? Well, this is a really great way for me to keep information around that I want to keep doing stuff with. So I might be collecting a bunch of parcels and marks that I want to incorporate into my work. And so this is a really great place for me to put them because the product list has all of this functionality that directly interacts with spatial. So when I see this parcel here and I want to find it again, I can click on this little menu option, which says View Additional Actions, and I can say, locate that parcel. and that is going to take me and show me on the map where that parcel is. Alternatively, I can go find a different parcel, and that's going to show me the one right next door, which I added before. Now, inside this, we've got these little expandable sections, very similar to the tree in Legacy. And inside here, I can see those same relationships that existed on the summary page. Now, you can always have confidence that whatever you see in the summary page is mirrored in the relationships in the product list. So if you don't want to use the summary page because you want to retain more focus on spatial, I'd encourage you to use the product list as a quasi information collection and gathering tool. So let's take a quick look at these relationships. And this is another favorite function of mine. One of the things that we kind of ran into really early on in Legacy is there was no way to easily populate your tree with things that are already in the tree. So let's say I want to take a look at this title and I want to see what instruments there are against this title. Well, if I expand this, I don't see the instruments here. And the reason for that is because the list only goes down in levels so far. Once you get to a certain point, we're like, hey, we can't keep going down this list forever. You need to choose, we need to set a point where it stops. So one of the things you can do here is if you find a title, an entity that has one of these icons here, like survey, this one's obviously a title, this one's a parcel, I can click on these actions and I can say, add as top level item. Now what does that do? What this does is it puts that item as a parent item back into the product list. So this allows me to populate my product list with entities that were previously just child items in the product list. And that allows me to bring in all of their additional references. So in this example here, I brought in that title and now I can go take a look at those current instruments. So you can actually repopulate your product list with entities that exist inside the product list. So that allows me to then go take a look at this instrument, for example, and say, oh, I actually want to add this instrument to the product list now because I want to see all of the records that were affected by that instrument. So just like that, I haven't done any searching at all. I've just immediately gone parcel, title, title, instrument, instrument, titles, and that allows me to quickly accelerate my investigation flow. So this is something that's really powerful in the product list. The other thing that the product list is here for is to enable you to do multi-product purchasing. What does that mean? So each of these items here that's got a little checkbox is a product that you can purchase and view. Now some of these have costs, like titles for example, and some of them don't have costs, like some of the supporting documents might not have costs associated with them. So do bear in mind that when you check these, it will tell you how much you're going to be charged if you order those. Now I'm an internal user here, so I don't actually see that cost because we don't have any costs associated for our work. But in your case, if I checked these, I would see purchase selected for $16, I think it is. It's $8 per record for certain things. So at that point here, I'd have a way of understanding, hey, how much am I about to spend if I go and do that? But let's show you something that is in the product list that is really powerful. So I'm going to select a bunch of products that I'm interested in. For example, I'm going to grab this reference survey and I want to find the Imperial Plan. Now, I've got a whole bunch of different things selected here. How do I quickly check what is actually selected for purchase if I've got 100 items in my product list? That's where this little tab here comes in. So at the top of the product list, we've got this thing called list view, and then we've got this thing called cart view. Cart view simplifies the list down to only show you the things that you have got selected for purchase. So this allows me to very quickly audit, hey, why am I buying the title with diagram and the title without diagram for that title? Surely I only need one of those. So in order to cut out those excess fees, I'd recommend swapping between those when you're about to do a purchase, just to make sure that you really want those things. So if I get rid of that one here and I just say, yep, cool, I'm going to purchase those. I only need those 3. I don't need that additional title. This allows me to quickly cut that down. If I tab back to list view, I can go back and see all of the possible options that I might be interested in. Okay. Some other things that we'll talk about briefly is the other options on the product list. So we've talked a little bit about the list view here, the cart view. Again, unfortunately, I am viewing an internal user account, so there are a couple of functions here that won't match precisely with yours, but yeah, please bear with me on that. Lastly, let's talk about the product list options. So at the top of the options here, I have the opportunity to start new lists. Now, if I was doing lots of different pieces of work and I wanted to save the information that I was working on, saving additional copies of all of these is going to get really, really powerful. Like if I know that I have to work on something completely different next week, but I still want to keep this stuff around, saving it as a dedicated list might be really helpful. So in this case, I'm on my notepad. Think of this as your like draft space. Everything everything in here is saved, but you can also clear it really easily. So it's important if you want to keep something around and keep it separate, it might be worth saving a specific list for it. So I'm going to take this item, this whole list of things that I have in here, and I'm going to save this as a new list. So if I click on that, I get the option here to add some details and a client reference if I need to. So I'm going to say here in this list, this is my test list, and I'll come back to this one later. So when I click save, that's now going to save this one, and I'm now inside the test list. So this means it's super easy. I can now go back to the notepad and clear the notepad because I now know that I have a saved copy of all of that information. So if I now go back to the list and I go, cool, I want to swap back to my test list work, I can quickly go and do that and bring up all of those entities. The cool thing is here is this also saves all of the things you've got earmarked for purchase. So if you knew you were building up like a big purchase that you wanted to do all at once, you could select these entities, save your list, come back, and it will still all be that way. So from here, I can now say, yep, I definitely know I want these things, and I could click. In my case, it's download selected, but for an external user, you would see purchase selected, and you'd have the option to either email these or download them. And I see Nick's coming onto the screen now, which means I'm running short on time. There is a lot of functionality in here. I'd encourage you to take a look at the help documentation. I'd encourage you to review some of the land wrap articles that we've sent out, which have additional information about the features that we've got. But otherwise, I will leave you guys there and hand back over to Nick. Thanks again for bearing with me. Short notice, hopefully it was okay to follow. I know I speak fast when I'm a little bit nervous. So thank you all for listening, and I'll hand back to Nick.
Thanks, Seb. That was fantastic. Notwithstanding that you only had about 2 minutes notice that you were going to have to jump in. So I hugely appreciate you covering for us there. Otherwise, it would have been a pretty clumsy webinar. We're going to move into the question and answer section. So I think it'd be great, Lyndon, I believe you were going to be helping with Q&A, and anyone else who I may chuck a question at, it'd be cool if you could chuck your camera on too. I see we've got a few questions here that are around kind of features that we haven't built. So I wonder if it's worth, Lyndon, if you just kind of cover that off up front.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And firstly, just Seb, that was amazing, getting handed that with 2 minutes notice. So well done. Yeah, look, we've got lots of improvement suggestions here, everyone, for how we can make our application better. And I just need to be upfront about this because we've received lots today, and we regularly receive lots via the feedback form. But at this stage, our focus is really very much on replacing our existing functionality we've got in Legacy Landonline, both for surveyors and for staff. Now, once we've completed that work and we've migrated to a new database from Informix to PostgreSQL, and that work will be hopefully completed in around 18 months' time, we will be in a much better position to consider these feedback suggestions for improvements and new functionality. Now, don't let that stop you sending us feedback. Feedback is completely welcome. Every week we get together, we read that, we consider it, and we rank it, and we place it in our backlog for when the time comes we have the appropriate budgets and resources available to deliver it. So one thing I do want to mention is we do have a budget, obviously, to fix things that are broken, and we regularly fix things and do updates. But at this stage, our ability to deliver functional changes is very limited. So do you want me to go through those questions, Nick, or how do you want to go? Did you want to read them out? Or
Yeah, we'll get through what we can.
Yeah.
I tried to prioritize the demo in this session because I could see we hadn't got too many questions, and obviously we'll circulate the answers to these questions with the webinar after the session. But anyhow, so can search filters such as in mark search be made per user, Lyndon?
Yeah, I actually really like that suggestion, Russell. Unfortunately, at this stage, we just don't have that level of functionality to set defaults there. So they will retain while you're in that screen, but as soon as you leave that screen and come back in, they'll reset back. So but something for us to consider for the future. Thank you.
Cool. And then we had one from Glenn Hunt. Assume vectors can be filtered on or off by distance or possibly other criteria.
Yeah. Nick mentioned it back at the start, very start of the webinar. That's one bit of functionality you won't have from day one when you don't currently have in web search, and you won't have for a few months after we switch off legacy search. We will be starting to build that in the next month, and we hope to have the filter vectors functionality available either late this year or early 2026. So still to come.
Oh, thanks, Lyndon. I'll do one more and we'll wrap up there, as I don't want to go over anymore. From Brennan Bates, will there be an option for marks and vectors only with the land XML export? I'm putting that in, that's my assumption, without parcels and legacy. Otherwise, you end up with lines doubling on top of lines, or possibly vectors doubling on top of lines. Lyndon, you got that one? Or?
Yeah, you want me to go on that one there? Yep, no problems. Look, Brendan, at this stage, we're not sort of anticipating implementing the ability to export just marks and vectors in your XML. But we are really keen to hear more to understand the impacts that has on your workflows. So send us, by all means, use the feedback, the light bulb icon within the app, and send us some feedback to explain the sort of impacts that has on your business and workflows if we don't have that functionality.
Awesome. Thanks, Landon. Oh, well, thanks, everyone. Time's up, so we're going to wrap up here. Big thank you to Seb. Big thank you to Phil Smith, who did all the prep and then couldn't present. And thanks to all of you for attending. We'll circulate the webinar as well as answers to the questions. Cheers all.